Who's your father? Who's your mother? What are we talking about this hour? Heritage. Heritage matters. Now, the interesting thing, when he gave this blessing, afterwards, you can imagine, Joseph F. Smith is pretty surprised. But no one is more surprised than Brigham Young. Brigham Young now says to Joseph F. Smith, by the way, did you notice I put you in the 12 and in the first presidency? He said, we don't have any vacancies right now. So could you keep it quiet? But come to conference, sit on the front row, and when there's a vacancy, I'll call out your name. Well, okay. Meantime, Joseph F. Smith, he's walking home from work. And suddenly, remember we talked about Heber C. Kimball yesterday. Heber C. Kimball now sees him walking towards him, and he says, young man, who are your parents? And he repeats, hey, my dad was Hiram, my mother Mary Fielding. And Heber C. Kimball says, oh, as I saw you coming towards me, he said, I received a revelation that soon you'll be in the leading councils of the church. And he says, be sure and come to conference. Okay, how did they do that? Okay, piercing the veil, do you see that? Okay, so then let me continue it on. Joseph Fielding Smith had a son, and the son was named after him. Okay, the interesting thing, his wife had, first she had daughter 1, and then she had daughter 2. And suddenly, you know how there's the gossips? People started to say, even to Joseph F., your wife, she is incapable of having a son, as if it is her problem. And suddenly, here comes daughter 3, and daughter 4, and finally, Julina, she owns it. She now says to her husband, Joseph Fielding Smith, will you let me go into the Salt Lake Temple? And she says, I'd like to be by myself in one of those rooms that have the altar. And she said, I'd like to pray before the altar like Hannah of old and ask the Lord, will he give me a son this time? And if he gives me a son, I will not only name him after you, I will train him to be just like you. So you look at our 16 prophets, where do you have a father-son, Joseph Fielding Smith, and his son, Joseph Fielding Smith. Okay, you see that? All right, so Smiths. Okay, John Lathrop. So, okay, questions on this so far? We good?
Yeah, these shoe stories. This is so cool.
Okay, it is really neat, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so John Lathrop. Who else is related to him? Well, who else is related to him is a man named Oliver.
Oliver.
Okay, good. Oliver Cowdery. Okay, so try and imagine this. Here's Joseph Smith. He's down in a place called Susquehanna, by the Susquehanna River in Harmony. He's pleading for the Lord. I need a scribe. I'm trying to do this Book of Mormon translation. And Oliver Cowdery, he stood 5'7", and he was small boned. And, well, there's a reason a man's a school teacher is that he wasn't big enough to really be a farmer. And so, and he always suffered from something called lung fever. Well, Oliver Cowdery is looking for a job, and he goes to Palmyra because he learns that there is an opening. And he's interviewed by Hiram Smith, a man on the Palmyra school board. So look what just happened. They don't know that they are cousins. Because how many generations back? 5 generations back. So, some of you will look at me and go, could we be related? And I'm going to go, if I'm not in your will, it's a mistake. Because guess what? We're talking heritage here. Okay, so Oliver Cowdery gets the job, and back then, school teachers lived with families. And so there's an empty bedroom in the Joseph Smith Senior Home, and he moves in there. I personally am grateful that I'm not living with you. And I think you are probably grateful that I'm not living with you. Okay, good. All right. So Oliver Cowdery moves into the Smith home. He teaches there in the Palmyra area. And finally, the school is over. They used to just have school in the winter. And Samuel Smith, the brother of Joseph, wants to go down and visit Joseph down in the Harmony region. And Oliver says, hey, I'm without a job. School is out. Let me go with you. Well, okay. April 5th, 1829. Now, notice, everything great happens in April, despite the fact we're here in class. But April 5th, 1829, here shows up Oliver Cowdery, and he meets Joseph for the first time. April 7th, 1829, Oliver is determined, I will stay, I will be your scribe to the Book of Mormon translation. Notice who's with Joseph May 15th, 1829, when Aaronic priesthood is restored. Oliver Cowdery. Is history by chance? Is it a family experience? Okay, so you get their ancestor would literally go to jail, to the dungeons, because he doesn't believe authority to act in the name of God is on the earth. And notice who's with Joseph when it's restored, meaning to bring back, it's Oliver Cowdery. Who's with Joseph when the Melchizedek priesthood is restored by Peter, James, and John? Okay, Oliver. Who's with Joseph when April 3rd, 1836, Elijah, Moses, Elias come to the Kirtland Temple, and you go once again, it's Oliver Cowdery. Okay, tell me, do Joseph and Oliver know they have an ancestor named John? No? You know, it's amazing. You know, a whole bunch of people throughout the world, they can actually do their ancestry and go back generation after generation. Anybody here do that? Okay, some, okay, very few of us, but they don't know. Okay, let me do another one. Okay, who's related to John Lathrop? There's a man named Parley. Got him? P. Pratt. Okay. Parley P. Pratt also claims John Lathrop as an ancestor. Okay, do you remember Parley P. Pratt? When he first gets hold of a copy of the Book of Mormon, reading is a burden. Eating is a burden. Sleeping is a burden. All he wants to do is to read the Book of Mormon. Parley P. Pratt, an incredible missionary. In fact, Parley P. Pratt, before his death, serves 12 missions. Okay, Parley P. Pratt has a brother. Anybody name him? Okay, Orson Pratt. Orson Pratt. At one point, Brigham Young, as they were building the Salt Lake Temple, he wanted to have the moonstone that went around the temple be decorative. And he wanted to have the different phases of the moon. And so Brigham Young asked Orson Pratt, a scientist of sorts, to sit outside during the month of April and every night to draw the phases of the moon. You know? Okay, so Parley P. Pratt, he shares a copy of the Book of Mormon with Orson Pratt. And Orson Pratt, what does he do for the church? He's the one that literally names the sections of the Doctrine and Covenants. And I've always been grateful to him because you have section 1, 2, 3, and it's your one scripture. I can do all the sections in order and not have to sing. And so, you know, you could say 120 minus 5, I could nail it, you know, and vice versa. So who is related to John Lathrop? They are. Who else is related to John Lathrop? There's a man named Wilford Woodruff. Okay, Wilford Woodruff. 36 days after he was serving, after he had been on a mission in England, he'd already baptized 600 people. And you'd say he not only baptized those prepared for the gospel, but spies that came to arrest him because he's causing such a stir. Well, you know, so you look, what am I trying to tell you? Heritage. Okay, heritage matters. You know, when someone says, oh, are you the daughter of so-and-so? You know, are you the son of so-and-so? Well, if you are, then why are you acting like that? because, you know, because heritage matters. Okay, what else am I telling you? Okay, can you see the Lord is preparing the people for the gospel? And it's not just Joseph Smith. He's preparing people literally all over the earth. if I kept going on this, you'd be able to say even presidents of the United States, you'd be able to look and you'd say royalty, different parts of the earth, you'd be able to see great inventors, and we could just keep going, and you'd say we could do an entire class on John Lathrop because he has, all of these children who survive, and then they have children. Winston Churchill can actually claim John Lathrop also. Well, okay. So in church, we call each other what? Brothers and sisters. What am I saying to you when I say, hello, sister? I'm older. Okay. But guess what? We matter. This is a family experience. Hello, brother. Hello, brother. Hello, sister. And we very, very much care about each other, because what are we doing? We're trying to gather the house of what? Israel. We're trying to gather the house of Israel now from literally all over the earth, and we're trying to gather, my brothers, okay, and my sisters. We're trying to pull them all in, and we just used one example of Joseph Smith. If I had used another reformer named William Stickney, similar story, we would find he's not only the Smith's ancestor, but the Youngs, the Kimballs, the Willard Richards, and you start to look and you go, amazing. In other words, here's the Lord, here's all these people, and suddenly, even though we talked about a tent, as Isaiah describes it, that's dormant upon the earth, it's obvious there's activity. Okay, good. Okay, questions on any of this? Okay. So, if you were to say, if you go all the way back to the 5th generation and say John Lathrop, would you anticipate that as it got closer to the birth of Joseph, that his ancestry would greatly enjoy the gifts of the Spirit? Okay, in other words, if you're the Lord and you're trying to prepare for, suddenly there's going to be a restoration. People that Joseph's going to interact with, say grandparents and parents, would they enjoy, okay, what are the gifts of the Spirit? What did we talk about yesterday? They are discernment, revelations, healings, okay, speaking in tongues, dreaming dreams, okay. So you got John Lathrop, and now we're going to do grandparents, and then parents, and then I'm going to get Joseph born. So I'm going to bring it now grandparents. If you were to look on the Smith side, the grandfather is named Aziel Smith. And now I'm going to tell you about Joseph's grandfather. Aziel Smith was always called Crooked Neck Smith. And some of the people against Joseph would say, oh, you're crooked just like your grandfather. And I would go, what are you talking about? Aziel Smith was called Crooked Neck Smith because he had damaged tendons on his neck and his head literally rested on his shoulder. So when we say, Crooked Neck Smith, it really was a crooked neck. For Aziel Smith, you would see him as part of the Revolutionary War in the United States. But Aziel Smith, we learn much about him from his will. Okay, a couple of things I liked about Aziel Smith. He said that in his will, that when he died, he wanted his virtues to live on in his posterity, but he wanted to take all his faults with him to the grave. And, I like that. Another thing I like about him is that he believed in the 10 Commandments, all right? But he actually thought if the Lord had had more room on those stone tablets, that he would have written an 11th commandment. And the 11th commandment for Aziel Smith was mind your own business. So I think, maybe we would have liked him. So what you pick up, he's a religious man, he's supportive of his nation, he wants his virtues to live on, he doesn't like people getting into his matters, he's a pretty strong individual. Okay, for Aziel Smith, we know that he enjoyed one gift of the Spirit. The gift of the Spirit that he spoke about was he claimed that he had received a revelation in a time in the United States when they were saying the Bible is your book of Revelations. That's the end of Revelations. There's no more Revelations. And JosephSmith now says, but I received one. In the revelation he claims he received, he learned that in his posterity line, now we're talking heritage, that someone would revolutionize or change religious thinking. Okay. JosephSmith has a son. Who's his son? Father of Joseph.
Joseph.
Okay, Joseph Smith Sr. Joseph Smith Sr. then has a son who will ultimately be our subject, Joseph Smith Jr. Okay, A.C.L. Smith, he's older now, he's in his 80s, and suddenly Joseph Smith Jr. has just translated the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is now off the press. Joseph Smith Sr., at the same time the Book of Mormon is coming off the press, has just learned that his father is on his deathbed. Joseph Smith Sr. concludes, I'm going to go up and see Dad, and I'm going to take Dad a gift. And the gift I'm going to hand him is a copy of the Book of Mormon. So here goes Joseph Smith Sr. to see his father, Crooked Neck Smith, who's written out his will, who, mind your own business. And suddenly when he arrives in the part of New York where A.C.L. Smith was living, he hands his father a copy of the Book of Mormon. And as he does so, his father, even though he's in his 80s, he's propped up in bed and without the aid of glasses, much to the envy of me and perhaps some of you, okay, he now begins to read the Book of Mormon. As he now reads it, he finally closes it, big tears, and he announces, at long last, I have lived to see who in my posterity line will revolutionize religious thinking. It is my grandson, Joseph Smith Jr. Okay, do you see that? We go from John Lathrop to we now come down to grandfather who says, oh, I believe in the gift of revelation. It's my grandson, Joseph Smith Jr. Okay, got Aziel. Okay, I now go to the grandfather on the mother's side, and his name was Solomon Mack. Solomon Mack, actually, he's pretty interesting. He's one of the most accident-prone people I've ever read about, other than perhaps me today. Every time I turned around, I hit my head 3 times. I'm like, what? Okay. But Solomon Mack, very, very accident-prone. For example, not just once, but twice he is walking through a forest, and not just once, but twice a tree falls down and hits him on the head. And you're like, buddy, be a quick learner, walk through once, don't do it twice. Okay, so another time, not just once, but twice, he's looking over a water. There's like a river going past, and he's looking at an old mill that's going around, grinding mill. And as he does so, he gets dizzy, he falls down, he falls into the grinding wheel. And suddenly you'd say, now you see him, now you don't, as his foot gets caught, and workers then at the mill jump in to rescue his life. So he's done. Okay. You can imagine if you are that accident prone that suddenly you've got health issues. And so Solomon Mack, who has more money than A.C.L. Smith, he begins literally traveling through the countryside looking for a doctor that can heal him from all of his pains. As he does so, he comes back from the experience, and his conclusion is, all doctors are quacks. Okay, what does that mean? They don't know how to do it. They're going to take your money, but you're not the better. And so he comes back, and the big question is there anything that he can do to relieve himself of pain? And his conclusion is, I think I'm going to pray and ask the Lord in the name of Jesus Christ, can you take away the pain? Well, he makes a great discovery. His conclusion was, if I pray, I don't have as much pain. He gets so excited about it, he actually writes a little book. and becomes the first of the Smith, or the kind of Joseph Smith's family line, to write a book, and it's called The Narrative. And in the book, he writes it in poetry. And for anyone that knows English, you'd say, oh, wow, it's so bad. Okay, it hardly rhymes. It's, you have no meter through the whole thing, but you discover two amazing things. One thing you discover is that Solomon Mack, while in the act of prayer, sees a pillar of light. Okay, Solomon Mack, while in the act of prayer, he hears his name Solomon. Now I'm going to come to young Joseph like we did last time. Okay, Joseph Smith. Our year is 1820. He's just been in the woods near his home in Palmyra. He comes back, he's leaning against the mantelpiece, and his mother says, what's the matter? And he says, never mind, Mom, all is well. He says, I've learned for myself that basically your church, the Presbyterian church, is not right, and now I'm going to role play. Okay, wait a minute, son. How do you know this? Well, Mom, I went out into the woods to pray. Well, Lucy went out into those woods to pray. And, did you see anything, hear anything? Well, yeah, Mom, I saw a pillar of light. Well, did I ever tell you about your grandpa? He saw that. Well, anything else? Well, yeah, Mom, I heard my name. Well, so did your grandpa. He heard his name. Well, anything else, son? Well, Mom, you better sit down for the rest. Okay, do you see that? So what are we talking about? We're talking about a family is being prepared for, in their family line, to have the restoration. You see that? And so it's a family thing.